Okay, so within the context of what we had just started talking about, I'd like to tell you a little story first. And that story has to do with good advice. The world is full of good advice. Lawyers have good advice. Doctors have good advice. Sometimes preachers have good advice. Even a politician occasionally will have good advice. Moms have good advice. Psychologists have good advice. A lot of people consider that the advice the Buddha gave was the very, very best advice. But let's just stay with ordinary good advice. The problem with ordinary good advice is that people don't take that good advice just when they need it the most. That's what makes the teachings of the Buddha so unique, is this quality of sati, to keep remembering, to remember to take the good advice, all the way up to what's called satipanya, to remember to be wise, to remember to take the wise way out, to remember to always consider the right good advice and to take that rather than the way that we feel. So that's the way that we would look at the whole path. But now I'm going to introduce something to you that may seem really strange. And that is that correct practice with sati then is all that's really needed. If you can find the correct way of practice and get the good results from that correct practice from the beginning, right through the middle, all the way to the end, then with that correct practice, that's all that's needed. Which means that we don't need any stories. We don't need any philosophy. We don't need any life stories of this or that saint or what Jesus did or what Buddha did. We don't need any of that kind of stuff if we're going to practice correctly. So that means that we should focus down on the parts of the Buddha's teaching that point to correct practice. Even if in the beginning, the way that this stuff about correct practice is presented looks very philosophical or high blown. But actually, it just fits in with the concept of correct practice. Correct practice, then you can handle the correct practice to take care of all of the other stuff in life. And that correct practice can be boiled down to very, very simple words like Goenka has one that's very famous. Never mind, start again. That's the entire practice. There's nothing else that you need to ever to do, because the never mind has sati built into it, and start again has that quality of a lion, the quality of a winner, rather than never mind, life is shit, which that's the way that most victims take it. And so there's a very important kind of quality that is built into correct practice, and that is the quality of success. And yet most of the ways that Westerners practice, they practice in a mode and method of failure. And why is that? Because they have been taught through the society that they live in and the religions that they have that life is a struggle, and anything that you want out of it valuable, you have to struggle for. You have to put in a lot of hard work and a lot of what they would call good action in order to get out of it any good results sometime in the future. An example of that is you be a good Christian and you'll go to heaven. Or another example is, hey, you can come work for us and at the end of the week you'll get a paycheck. You see, it's the same stuff.
Yeah.
Work now, reward later. Except for the problem of the reward is not guaranteed. It's only promised. There is almost always a bait and switch in there. And that's why so many of the Western students, when they're practicing meditation, they think that they're failing at it. Well, they are in a way that they're not practicing correctly. So one of the hallmarks of correct practice is good result. And one of the hard hallmarks of not practicing correctly is working too hard, struggling, and then giving up. And that's how most people approach practice. I've even heard by a very good friend of mine who actually works at the Goenka retreat in California, and he's got access to all of the data. He says that the forms for the retreat are filled out online. Mm-hmm. And one of the questions is, what retreats have you done before? And he says is that in their database, it looks like that people wait 7 years between their first and their second retreat on average. Now, some people get really gung-ho. They'll take a retreat and they want another one right away. But many people, they don't take a retreat until they really get into a desperate situation. And then they say, maybe I'll go back and I'll take another Vipassana retreat. The reason that that's true, that it takes so long for people to get back into the practices, is because when they were there, they weren't practicing correctly, not getting good benefit out of it right then and there. And therefore, they're saying, what's the point? This is more work than it's worth. Now, think about that. It's more work than it's worth, which means the karma machine right now is broken. Look at all the right effort and all of the good action that I put into this, and I'm not getting any result out of it. And so this is why it's so important for the students to figure out how to practice correctly so that they will get the good results out of it. And there's a whole lot of stuff in there that is going to prevent us from doing the work correctly. All right. So there are two things to look at. One is that the results that someone gets from their sitting practice right in this very moment, and then the residual buildup. An example of that is that when the student is playing the piano right now, he's developing the skills of the chords and the scales and doing the little routines that his teacher is giving him. But then he finds later that there's pieces of music that he needs those chords and scales in, and he can do that because he's already practiced it. So there's going to be a residual buildup. This is why the Buddha was so emphatic about using the word training. And generally the Pali word for that is bhava or bhavana. And so Bhante Gunaratana has the Bhavana Society. That here in Thailand, we have, in fact, just on the other island here, the retreat center called Deepa Bhawan. There, the word Deepa is the word for light. So the development of light, which means the development of insight. But it's a development, a skill to be developed. But we develop that skill by practicing it over and over and over and over and over again. And if we're developing the skills that we need and we're getting the results of it, then there's something else that begins to happen. And that is what we would call confidence, shraddha. In other words, I know that I can do this because I'm doing it right now. I did it 5 minutes ago. I did it last week. I'll do it again next time. Okay? This shraddha, confidence, is actually an important quality of the change of attitude, which is the second aspect of the Eightfold Noble Path. With right view, and in this regard, we can say that right view is, I'm going to learn to meditate, whatever the word meditation is. I'm going to practice that which the Buddha recommends. He never used the word meditation or anything like it. There was no noun for it back then. He just says, go to the root of a tree or to a hut or an empty space or to the forest, sit down cross-legged and mindfully, which means with sati, bring your attention to the fore, which means right now, and mindfully, deeply breathe in and breathe out. And then the rest of the Anapanasati Sutta becomes very confusing to the Westerners because it's all set in a formalized context that's based around the four foundations of mindfulness, the Satipatthana. The Satipatthana is the body, the feelings, the mind, and the mind objects. Well, now it is not actually quite even possible, I think, for a student who wants to meditate to go into the meditation hall, sit down, and leave both the mind and the feelings in the kuti. He's only going to bring the body to the meditation hall because he's going to watch his breath. But next year I'll bring the mind in and we'll work with the mind later, right? That's not possible. When you sit down and meditate, you've got all four foundations of mindfulness right there. There they are. And so we need to begin to start dealing with them all together, kind of as a package. And if there's any quality of instantaneous, which do I do first? You could imagine that, well, that's actually kind of built in. It's built into it in the sense that the Buddha calls it adventitious defilements. The defilements will come up when they find an advantage to do so, what we would call opportunity. Or a better way of looking at it is cause and effect. When the cause for the defilements come up, then the effect, that defilement, will manifest itself. The question is, does it manifest itself subconsciously, or does it come up to full-blown consciousness? If it's subconscious, that means that the reptilian brain is going to take care of it without any of the frontal cortex having a clue about what's going on. That will happen throughout daily life. For instance, the arm can itch. We can have a conversation and people will scratch their arm like that and continue to talking, and they don't even recognize that they were scratching. Not while they were scratching that. And then it itches again, and then they'll scratch again while they're talking. And they're not, this is what we mean by subconscious. And there's a lot of subconscious stuff that the body does. And so we want to start bringing that into consciousness, and we do it in two ways. One is by holding the body still and maintaining a still posture, because if you have the subconscious intention to move the body, scratching or whatever, and the conscious mind is thou there on guard saying, no, we're going to hold the body still, then those subconscious things start to come up. And we can begin to see those itches. We can begin to see all kinds of things happening in the body, eventually including a lot of stuff that would be associated with feelings and Vedana. But they do express themselves in the body. Things like anxiety, anger, fear, sadness. All of these kind of things are emotions in the English language, but they do have bodily components. Anxiety, for instance, people will raise their shoulders sometimes. They have tension. Students who have anxiety in the meditation hall, but they're not aware of the anxiety, will come out of the meditation hall with a headache or tension in the head. And they don't realize that that tension in his head is coming because all of the tightness in their shoulders and whatnot. If they would relax their shoulders, they wouldn't give themselves a headache so much. And so this is what the real practice is all about, is getting really in touch with the body and the relationship between the body and the feelings, and the relationship between the feelings and the mind. Now, this is well known and well practiced in society. An example of that is the debating. You know, they have, big universities have big formal debate societies and whatnot. Mm-hmm. One of the big rules in those things is no ad hominem attacks. You're not supposed to attack the other guy. You're only supposed to attack his side of the argument.
Yes.
The reason that is true is because if you attack an individual, he will become defensive, he will become emotional, he may even become angry. And if he becomes angry, then now all of the blood and all of that stuff is all over his body, getting ready to punch somebody out. And it's not up here for him to think anymore. And so if you can discombobulate an opponent in an intellectual exercise, then you can win. This is why wrestling, WWE, they spend so much time screaming at each other about how bad the other guy is, because that works up the crowd, you see. But the players themselves, they know it's all an act. They could be best of friends while they're publicly trashing each other as hard as they can. So now that we're understanding that the body has influence with the feelings and the feelings have influence with the mind, we can also see that that works backwards in the other direction. That you can have thoughts that affect your feelings. You literally can change your mind about something, and in the process, you change the way you feel about it. This is important for you to recognize that within this quality of the Satipatthana, that all of these things are interrelated. And that part of the practice of Anapanasati is to see these interrelationships and to put them to work to your advantage. But the way that it's taught looks so formalized, and you only talk about the body. And so students get the idea, oh, I'm supposed to practice Anapanasati with the body for 5 years, and then I can do Vedana. And after I do Vedana, then I do the mind. And after I do the mind, then I'll do the mind object. And they'll never get anywhere with that. But with the correct practice, which means we have to put everything together, we realize that, wait a minute, that even the Eightfold Noble Path of the Buddha is a way of looking at how to practice correctly. For instance, if you don't have right view, then you won't even sit down to meditate. Right sati. If you can't remember to meditate, what's the point? Then we come in with right effort. What is one's right effort? Because if we don't have right effort, then we're going to wind up having headaches, tension. We're going to have more work put in. We're going to get exhausted and tired. We're going to be more interested in how to get out of the funk that we're in, causing more funk, rather than actually do the practice. So these are the problems that happen with meditation. So we have to make sure that we're going to practice it correctly, knowing that there is going to be an interrelationship between the various functions of the body, and that we have this aligned within the context of Anapanasati. Well, now we see that Anapanasati and the 4 foundations of mindfulness, which is actually the Satipatthana, work directly with the Eightfold Noble Path, including, and especially some aspects, including Right Noble Sati. We wind up seeing sati just all over the place. You got to remember, you got to keep track of what you're doing. And we have to do it with right effort. But the important quality that we want to start looking at is the quality of right attitude. Because most students have an attitude that they're a loser. That's why people start meditation. Hey, if you were an absolute winner and you were absolutely satisfied with your life, who needs meditation? This is one of the rationales behind the Buddha Sutta, number 22. There are 2 major similes. One is the simile of the snake. Do you know that simile? The other is the simile of the raft, and that's the one that I want to point out, but it's actually quite important to recognize as a beginning student the simile of the snake. The simile of the snake is that if you're going to catch a snake, you have to catch it in the right way. Even in the sutta, it talks about taking a long stick that's got a fork in it, a forked stick. so that you can pin the head of that snake down with that forked stick, and then you can come right up to that stick with your hand and grab that snake right by the throat. If you don't grab him right by the throat, if you have even a little bit of snake that can twist and turn around, he's going to bite you. If you grab that snake by the tail, for sure you're in grave danger. There is a movie that I would like to mention about that, just in passing. The name of the movie is Cool Hand Luke. And Cool Hand Luke got put into prison in Louisiana, and the whole movie is about how cool Cool Hand Luke is. So one of the episodes, they're out digging in the ditch with the road gang, and there's a rattlesnake. And Cool Hand Luke goes over and grabs that rattlesnake by its tail, intentionally grabbing it by the tail. And he's got it up and he's swinging it around and he's saying, "Hey, boss, here it is, shoot it." Because the guy's out there with the gun and he's already taking aim. And so Cool Hand Luke just drops and shakes that snake down so it falls straight down, just enough time for that guard to shoot that snake. Now that's cool. That's really, really cool that he's going to grab that snake by the tail and hold it up for the guy to shoot it. He really trusted that guy to be able to shoot that snake because he could have missed and then he'd have gotten bitten. So this is really fit in with that sutta. Remember that you've got to catch the Dhamma by its throat. You cannot just sneak up to Buddhism from behind and hope you can get a hold of it like that, the way that a lion would get a gazelle, sneak up from behind. You cannot sneak up from behind a snake. You've got to catch it immediately, directly by the throat. There's a whole lot of good reasons for that, and we'll talk about them later, and you can see how it fits into context, because a lot of people bring their religious beliefs from whatever religion or society that they came from into Buddhism. But Buddha didn't teach any beliefs. He didn't talk much about afterlife directly for himself, other than for his monks to be free of it and do what you need to do right now so that you will not be reborn. That was his teaching. He did not teach, does rebirth actually exist or not? Because that was already common knowledge. Everybody believed in rebirth and reincarnation. The whole crowd did. Well, there were a few teachers who didn't. In fact, there's 6 of them that are quite famous, and they all had their own set of students. And they're actually discussed in the suttas. But the point is that most of the people who came to the Buddha to ask him questions were Brahmin. This is actually pointed out. Always, these are Brahmins who, and they already came with a full set of beliefs. Now, here's the part that's very difficult for most people to understand. Sometimes our old beliefs interfere with the way that we should be practicing if we're wanting to practice correctly. Here's an example of that. Oh, well, I'm going to be reborn and I'll just get a better life next time and then I'll practice Dhamma. Have you ever heard anything like that?
Yeah.
So that's going to weed out a whole lot of people. Then another group of people are going to do the practice of meditation, and then they say, darn, this is hard. This is going to take me a long time. This is going to take lives and lives. Loser's mentality. Have you ever heard of that?
Yes.
Okay. This is also, those beliefs keep people from practicing correctly. But if you have the belief, I can do this, and I can do it in the beginning and get good results. I can do it in the middle of the practice as skills are developing and get good results. And it will also be good in the end when the skills are fully developed and I can live a life of ease and comfort. And if I can live a life of ease and comfort and really feel easy and comfortable and secure, safe, and happy, then my sila, or my behavior, is exemplary. If I don't want anything, why should I take anything? If I don't hate anybody, why should I harm them? In this regard, you could go so far as to say that almost all of the Buddhist path could be brought down to just one word. In fact, the Buddha actually said this, that the entire path of the Buddha can be put into one word, and that one word is friendship. To be friends with one another. Now, that works right from the very beginning. We need that for just to have a society. If everyone was an enemy of everyone else, I won't know what would happen to the human race. But later, when we get into the deep practice, we begin to understand, oh, wait a minute, friendship is actually the cure. It's a medicine for the cure of the spiritual disease. And what is that spiritual disease? The disease of being alone, abandoned, insecure, without proper assistance, dangerous. Now, what is that? That's actually the point about conceit. It is the I am. And if I am, that means that everything that is not me is dangerous and it will attack me. But if you begin to see everything in the sense of us and we, and if we're all in the same boat together, there's not even a boat, we're in it together. Some know how to swim and some people don't know how to swim. Some of the swimmers, they even know how to float on their back, while a lot of people are out there drowning because they don't know how to swim and they don't know how to float on their back. So that's what we have to do first, is to teach them to swim, and then they'll figure out how to float on their back all on their own. So this is another way of looking at the Dhamma, is that how can we get out of it right now? And that beliefs in the future will actually harm and prevent us from getting on the path correctly. This is why the Buddha calls that the first fetter. The very first fetter. There are three fetters, and when you have released those three fetters, then this is what would be called the state of Sotapan. But nothing will happen until that first fetter is dealt with. And that first fetter is dealt with from the position of who am I? And the correct practice of Anapanasati, we recognize that, wait a minute, there's a whole lot of processes going on in here. There are mental processes, there are emotional processes, there are bodily processes, there are mental processes that have certain kind of thoughts, and other mental processes that have different kind of thoughts. But in all of that, there's really no me in there. So now we got a little bit deeper. That in fact, if you recognize it correctly, Anapanasati is not just a method of practice development skills. It is also the method and the way to research the mind to find out what the mind really is and how it actually functions. And this is what we call paticca samuppada. Have you ever heard of that word before?
Yes.
Okay, so now we're on the page. Dependent origination actually is what we're doing when we're correctly practicing Anapanasati. Amazing. But you can see all of that stuff is there. Well, anything in the anything that's got to do with paticca samuppada, if you keep looking at it, what is in there? Well, it starts with ignorance, it ends in suffering, and somewhere in the middle is a bunch of feelings. But then there's these bodily sankharas and mental sankharas and all this grasping and clinging and all of that kind of stuff that goes into paticca samuppada. And a lot of people think that that means that proves that there is a self to be born. but really it's more like a concept of a self that's to be born. In the way that we're talking about it now, you could say that an owner is required if there is ownership. In other words, if I say it's mine, the word it's is very short and the word mine is very big. And it makes no sense to go around saying when two kids are fighting over a toy and both of them are saying it's and the other one says it's. no, it's not. It's mine. And that's the ego. Actually, I'm a little slower, reluctant to use the word ego because there's too many definitions. Some of them are actually conflicting. Mostly the way that the word ego is used actually contradicts Freud, who had a different definition. When people talk about ego, Freud would call that id. And it's funny the word id that he used, because we use that word id for ID. And that's exactly what we have, identity. The me in there. To where what he's talking about ego, Freud uses it is in the sense of the adult in the room. The one who can see things clearly. Well, that's more like frontal cortex, but common language does not use the word ego that way. They talk about it in the sense of id. And so I generally try to avoid using the word ego. But what we are talking about is that there is the birth of the concept of that there is an owner and that I am the owner. But when we really understand Paticca Samuppada, we begin to say, oh no, there's not a me in here. What there is a whole lot of processes that bring up the concept of me. And not only that, but if you look at Paticca Samuppada in the order that is given, that me is necessary for suffering. If there is no me there, then who is it that's suffering? That's amazing, isn't it? That's why this is the first fetter, is for people to be able to see that there is no self, and specifically and most important, there is no soul. What do we mean by the word soul that's different than self? In fact, the word anatta, that is commonly translated as no self, I don't know why the Christians did it that way, because it's very clear that they're not talking about a self the way that we normally use it in language. They're talking about soul, an immortal soul, an eternal soul, a soul that will get reborn somehow or another. In Christian language, is either into heaven or hell, or the Catholics have someplace in between. With the Hindus, they have all kinds of things in places. I mean, they have animal worlds, and with that, you have everything from a gorilla to a worm. And then we have the which is basically the concept of just being hungry all the time. But these states are states of mind. Hell is a mental state. It's not a physical place. Every language that I know of, every culture that I've seen that has pictures or representations of hell looks like it's the human body that's being tortured. It has a lot to do with skin, bones, blood, and all of that kind of stuff. But the Buddha says, wait a minute, you got to look at that stuff, because the real suffering is not the body. It's the fact that we do not like what's happening to the body, and the do not liking is the suffering. If you're fine for stabbing yourself, then go ahead and stab yourself and enjoy it. But if you don't want to get stabbed, then if somebody stabs you, you really are in pain. You're in two kinds of pain. One, got stabbed, and two, he stabbed me. So with this, we can recognize that this selfishness that's created, that's why the Buddha put that as the first fetter. And so that means that's the very first thing that needs to be really deeply looked into. And that the method of doing that is with Paticca Samuppada, but we cannot do Paticca Samuppada without the Four Noble Truths. That the whole frame of reference is around the Four Noble Truths. Do you know them? Do you know what the Four Noble Truths are?
Yeah.
All right. So what's the second Noble Truth?
The craving is the source of suffering. Craving, not liking, not liking, and delusion.
All right. Now we're getting closer to it. Exactly. Well, I actually did that in my description of Paticca Samuppada just to set you up for this. Look at Paticca Samuppada, and what do you find? You find dukkha at the end. What is the cause of dukkha? Right from the very get-go, there's delusion.
Yeah.
And then along the way, we come into feelings of liking and not liking. So you can see that actually that the Paticca Samuppada is nothing but a very clear breakdown of the second noble truth. And so when we begin to investigate the second noble truth, that actually means that we do it by investigating Paticca Samuppada. And the way to do that is with Anapanasati. Now, when we put all of this in context, we're beginning to see, oh, now we know what it means by correct practice. Because correct practice brings us through the skill development into recognizing that I am not what I thought I was, and more to the point, that I can change. Now, a lot of people in the West especially, and Christianity is hardcore teaching that all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. Paul even went so far as to say, good, who are you to think you're good? Only God is good. All right. So that whole teaching there is to keep people in the state of victim, to be victimized by the world, by the gods, by the society, by their own sin. And by the way, the sin is not theirs, it's original. And the only way out is by taking Jesus as your savior. In other words, you are a victim and you need a helper to get you out of the hole you're in. And you didn't even dig the hole that you're in. You're just digging it deeper. This is why attitude is so important with the teaching of the Buddha. Because why? Because that's the very thing that needs to be changed, is our attitude. To come out of the attitude of I need help and I can't do it, and I've got to wait a long time before the karma machine or God or Santa Claus brings me the gift that I'm sitting here on this floor pining for. It's almost like the karma machine has a stopwatch, and when it comes up to 351 hours, he's going to come in there and whack you with a happy brush. Well, the question is, why aren't you for 351 hours slapping yourself with your own happy brush? Why do you have to wait for the karma machine to come in? It might not come. So this is the way that people practice incorrectly, is because they think that they want something out of it and that they've got to wait. But correct practice is getting the benefit right here, right now, and the benefit is in two ways, or actually several ways. The benefit, one, is that I feel like a champion, a winner right now. Number two, I'm developing skills so that I can do that next time a little bit better than I'm doing it now. And the number three, which is the most important, is I can do this on my own without any help. that I respect the teacher, I listen to the teacher, but the teacher does not sit down on the floor to make me happy. I've got to do that. That's the way that we begin to practice. So it's this attitude that's going to develop more and more and more into a winner's attitude, more and more and more into the joy that can be had. And this is why Shraddha starts to develop, that confidence. And when confidence builds up to a certain point, that you know that these hindrances that come into the mind, that cloud the mind and make one sad or confused or whatever the hindrances are, that whatever these hindrances are, they do not have ownership of the mind. They can be chased out and wholesome thoughts can be put in. Once we come to that conclusion that I can do this, I can chase the bad thoughts out so that I can see what's going on, put wholesome thoughts in my mind, the Buddha calls this the very first step, the first knowledge on the noble path. Get that straight. The first step on the noble path is when the student says, no matter how obstructed with hindrances my mind is, I can clean it out. I can do this. That confidence, is that Shraddha is strong enough to bring one up to that point that I can do this. Then the next step, the next knowledge would be that I can get the self into a state of satisfaction, into a state of calmness, into a state of relaxation. I can get the mind fit for work, in fact. This state that I'm talking about right now, and we'll talk about it later, is the first jhana. And this is the practice of the Buddha. There's several sutras where it's pointed out, among other things, that it is not all of the high jhanas that is liberating, that it's the first jhana that's liberating. Why? Because, among other things, we don't want to shut the thought processes down. We want to control them. We don't want to kill them. We don't want to beat it down like it was an enemy. We want to make the mind into a friend so that we can have the thoughts that we want to have. It's like a barking dog that's untrained. But a good owner, a good trainer will be able to call the dog and he'll stop barking. Any good dog will do that. I'm very surprised. These dogs here will find somebody or something in the yard and they'll just yell and bark and bark and bark and bark. And all I have to do is say one word to them and they know that I'm the boss. And so it's okay for them to shut up. I approve, you know. Well, we need to have the mind that way also, to train the mind so that it will shut up when it's time to shut up. But I mean shut up in the sense of stop thinking unwholesome thoughts so that we can start thinking wholesome thoughts. And when we come to that state of being able to control the mind for those unwholesome thoughts, that's when it becomes opportune for us to also begin to manage feelings. Feelings of anxiety, feelings of anger, feelings of fear, that we need to pacify or control these feelings rather than murder them. Have to tame them. We want a tamed mind, domesticated as opposed to wild. So this domestication of the mind means that we can control the mind, the contents of the mind. We can control the mind in the sense of the thoughts, and we can control the mind in the sense of the feelings by pacifying them, not killing them. That in fact, anxiety has a value. Anxiety has been keeping us alive. If we didn't have any anxiety at all, we probably would die. And so we really do want to use that So long as you have a job, so long as you get up out of bed every morning, so long as you go to the kitchen to eat, whatever you're going to do, there is going to have to be a little bit of a level of anxiety in there to motivate you that something needs to be done. If you have absolutely no motivation, then you might as well pack your body in salt, put it in a mud cave, and mummify yourself. They do that in Thailand, you know, but for all the wrong reasons. I was giving you a right reason to do it. That is complete freedom from anxiety. But we don't want to be completely free from it. We don't want to murder it. We want to leave enough of it there so that it's useful, valuable, and wholesome. Anger that way could be called correctly righteous indignation, that you know that something is wrong and that it's harming people, maybe not harming you, but something needs to be done, and we have a voice for that. But we don't have to get angry, but we can get really loud. Bhikkhu Buddhadasa was known for that. That he did have political views back in the time when Thailand needed a couple of new political views, because that was a time when, that was during the Vietnam time, Pol Pot and communist insurgency and all of that. And Bhikkhu Buddhadasa's basic thing was, you guys have got to get it together. You need to put down your weapons and start talking this stuff out. That's how he used the word socialism. But the point is that we do not want to destroy these feelings. That in fact, you could use the word sadness in the sense that if sadness is improperly used, then we feel sad. If it's properly used, you could call it compassion. To have a heart for other people, to see their suffering, to recognize it, but not let it overwhelm you. But rather you have control over your feelings now. So this is the actual way of practicing, and this is then what we would call correct practice that leads to freedom. So that's the problem then, because originally I told you that it doesn't matter what anybody believes, so long as they're correcting practice, so long as they're practicing correctly. But now we've gone through it. Oh no, we have to begin to start changing our beliefs a lot if we're going to practice correctly. Because our beliefs get in the way of correct practice. So now let's do it kind of by the numbers. Let's say that the beginning student, the first thing that he says, okay, I'm going to meditate, I'm going to watch the breath. In, out, in, out, in, out, mothers, in, out, sister, daughter, cousin, last month, granny's dead. Wait a minute, in, out, in, out, in, out. Okay, so what's happened just then is that the mind has wandered away. When the mind wanders away, it goes into its normal state. That's the normal state. This stuff about anapanasati and watching your breath, that's weird stuff. That's not normal. So the mind is doing what it always does. It's just doing a normal thing. And yet the meditator, he sits down and he sees the mind wandering away. What does he do? He gets angry. He gets mad at his own mind. It's out of control. And he calls it monkey mind. And, oh, I don't know how to meditate. And all of this confusion and anger and upsetness comes. They're just not practicing correctly. The right way to practice is to have right effort. Part of the Eightfold Noble Path. If you have right effort, what does that mean? It means easy effort. Just enough effort to get the job done. The important thing is to get the job done. And then the next important thing is only enough effort to get that job done. Anything more than that is not necessary. But when the students see the mind wandered away and they don't like it, now it's going to take a lot of effort to get it to do the right thing because they're already going in the wrong direction. And the harder they push, the further in the wrong direction they go. So what's the right way to do it? Well, this is where step 10 of Anapanasati comes in. Step 10 is gladdening the mind. The first thing that happened was sati came up, and we recognized that the mind has wandered away. That's actually experiencing the mind. That's step 9 of Anapanasati, right there. So we can see that, well, we already have, I mean, we can't even do step 1 of Anapanasati unless we can do step 9. And if we can't do step 10, then we probably are going to go right back into hindrances, and we still can't do step 1 of Anapanasati. So now we're beginning to see how all of this stuff kind of fits together. This is what I meant by adventitious defilements. In other words, we kind of work with it as it goes in a natural sequence. So the first thing that we do is that we gladden the mind, that we freshen it up. We can do that in several ways. The way that I like is, aha, I caught you, Mr. Hindrance. I see you wandering around in there. I see you dressed up like Aunt Susie. And I remember an argument I had with her. And I've got better things to think about than you. So out you go, Mr. Hindrance. And the quality then comes from, aha, I've caught you. Now, funny thing that having that new thought in the mind, aha, I caught you, has just chased out the actual hindrance that we previously saw. Just one mind moment later, just one thought later, we've already made a major change in the mind. With that, aha, I got you. We have brought in right effort. We have gladdened the mind. We have chased out the hindrances. Look how far we've gotten with just one statement, aha, I caught you. And so the next thing is to recognize that this gladdening the mind also has an effect upon feelings. If we can gladden the mind, then we can gladden the feelings, especially with the right kind of thoughts. And the right kind of thoughts to have is, I can do this. The right kind of thought is, I'm a champion. The right kind of thought is, I can control my own mind. I can choose what thoughts are going to be there, and I am going to chase out thoughts that are unwanted. I'm a winner. I'm a champion. I'm a lion. Like the Buddha. You practice the way of the Buddha, you become a Buddha. And that's, as far as I know, the very, very best there is. The highest quality of humanity, the noble one of the Buddha. So you're going after some pretty lofty goals, and guess what? You just met it. So you should feel really, really good that I could do the Buddha's thing. I, too, am a lion. I'm joining a really, really powerful club when I can clean out my own mind. Got some friends out there who could do it too. And so this win, this power, this excellent good feeling then will settle into satisfaction. I like it. This is good. And surprisingly enough, this state of satisfaction, which in Nepali is called sukha, in the Thai language, they shorten everything and they shorten it down to suk. They've got duk and suk. Dukkha is unsatisfactory and or dissatisfaction, and sukha is satisfaction. And that's really all the Buddha's path is about, is coming out of dissatisfaction into a state of satisfaction. What else is there? If you're completely satisfied to the way that you are, if some Buddhist came up to you and says, oh, being satisfied is not enough, you need to be enlightened. Well, wait a minute. If I'm satisfied and there's this thing enlightened, but I really am satisfied with what I've got, then I don't really need this other thing called enlightenment. Now, here's the question. Who is it that is actually enlightened? Who is dissatisfied? In that regard, we can think of enlightenment and satisfaction as actually the same thing. That's a much better way of looking at it, because the word enlightenment has gotten really high flown. The people who use the word enlightenment, they put it up there on the Jesus shelf. They try to put Buddha up there on that Jesus shelf too, and put it way high away. That's why it takes lives and lives of hard work instead of something that you can realize right now. Right now you can be the lion. Right now you can feel like that winner. Right now you can change your attitude. And your job now is to practice that skill over and over and over again so that you spend more and more time as a lion and less time as a victim. And that's correct practice. You spend more and more time in satisfaction and less time in unsatisfaction. And when you get yourself into a state of satisfaction, the important thing is to recognize that you are in a state of satisfaction. You are now full-blown into the experience of the third noble truth. What is it like to be free from suffering? The answer is, I'm free from suffering right now, and boy, is this a blast. And so it really is all about experiencing things right here, right now, in this present moment. And by working with the Four Noble Truths like this is suffering. This is freedom from suffering. This is the process or procedure that creates suffering. And therefore, the Eightfold Noble Path, when it's practiced correctly, including the Anapanasati that I've mentioned, because you use the Eightfold Noble Path to practice Anapanasati. We practice Anapanasati for the fulfillment of the four foundations of mindfulness. And by fulfilling the four foundations of mindfulness, we get a good close look at what the mind is doing and who I am. So the Four Noble Truths, by looking at it directly, one comes to the position that I am not what I thought I was. I do no longer hold this personality view. And that's the way that the path works. The path of the Buddha. By seeing directly how the mind works, step-by-step sequence of events that leads to suffering if I'm not careful. But if I start watching what's going on, then I can begin to manage those feelings so that they don't wind up in suffering. Bhikkhu Buddhadasa talks about this in the sense of wisdom at the point of contact. If you can be wise at the point of contact, then when those feelings arise, you got them. You know how you feel. You can change. You've already started to change how you feel just by having that statement, aha, I got you. That's actually almost all you need for your whole life. Be mindful enough that whenever anything happens that causes suffering, an argument with a girlfriend or a stubbing of the toe or anything that happens, we can say, I got you. Aha, I see you, Mr. Anxiety. Aha, I see you, Mr. Anger. And while I'm angry, I'm going to shut my mouth. I am not going to spread my poison out to other people. I'm going to be quiet until I can breathe deep enough to start to manage that anger. And then I'll talk. So it all is about that aha, I caught you. And the aha is sati. So this is the correct way of practice. And we have actually mentioned all of the stuff in there. I've actually, without telling you, that I mentioned not only step 9 and 10, but step 5 and 6. That winner is the piti, that feeling of elation that I can do this, the lion's roar. That's piti. Sukha then is the satisfaction of being able to sit there, and both piti and sukha and having the mind free from hindrances, all three are jhana factors for the first jhana. The next two is the mind as is working correctly, because you can apply the mind to what you want to apply it to and keep it there. This is what we mean by being on guard. So guess what? We've got all the jhana factors. Just by practicing Anapanasati, it brings us directly into the first jhana, where we can do the work we need to do. So step 5 and step 6 then work with step 7. That step 7 is to be on guard for and experience the mental formations as they arise. And they arise in 2 ways. They arise as thoughts and they arise as feelings. The first thing we're going to work with is thoughts. To make sure that you keep only wholesome thoughts in the mind and you're not going to entertain unwholesome thoughts. Anytime you find unwholesome thoughts in the mind, like ain't it awful, on whatever topic, then you can turn that topic into joy. An example of that is that many people, every time they think of Donald Trump, they go into bad feelings. They can't see him as a joke. So whenever you think about Donald Trump, don't think about it and feel bad. Think about it and feel really good. Look at American politics. Isn't that a riot?
So usually thoughts and feelings, like, they arise in very quick succession, right? Are you saying not to work with the feelings, to work with the thoughts instead? Because it feels like they all arise like almost
Generally,
instantaneously.
the emotions are a little more subtle. Now, people do, right from the very beginning of practice, when they're practicing correctly, they start working with feelings immediately.
Mm-hmm.
The meditation students do begin to get in touch with their anxiety, get in touch with their anger, get in touch with their sadness, get in touch with their competitiveness, their that longing to be important,
Yeah.
that longing to be there because they feel empty inside. They feel empty inside because they don't love their own self, so they need to go get their love from someone else. And the word love has always got the quality or the connotation of greed. I want it. I love it, therefore I want it. Don't you just love her dress? Dripping with sarcasm. So the practice then is to become satisfied. Whatever you need to do to come to a state of satisfaction. And if you can get into a state of satisfaction, then there's only one thing left to do. Maintain that state of satisfaction. This is where step 7 of Anapanasati comes in the sense of watching the mind. Watching the mind and watching the feelings when we get a little better at it. But important ones in the beginning is to make sure that you can maintain wholesome thoughts. Why, if the hindrances come back, you've lost your jhana. And almost always the quality of the hindrances has to do with the quality of being a loser, the quality of not having right attitude. We've begun to go back into the normal way of being a victim because we were raised to be victims. Everyone in the society is raised to be a victim of the society. And you know who are the people who are the most victimized? The very, very wealthy. They have such greed for more and more and more money. They feel so dissatisfied with $100 million, they need $1 billion. They have no satisfaction. Money brings no one any satisfaction. And when you have been told and then live your life as if money will bring satisfaction, you're living a lie. That all we need is the 4 requisites: just enough housing, just enough food, just enough clothing, just enough medicine, and in our case, just enough Skype. Adequate, just enough. We don't need more. But people with money, they say, oh, well, money got me this happy, and let me get more money and I'll be more happy. It don't work like that. That's just keeping our own greed machine going. And there's no end to it. And why is the greed there? It's because we think we need something. And who are the ones who are in need? Victims. Losers. But when you bring on the attitude of being a winner, then greed doesn't mean so much to you anymore. You don't need anything. You're fine as you are. So this is the feeling to be cultivated, the feelings of satisfaction, the feelings of sukha. That humans spend far too much time developing bad feelings that give them bad results, leading to suffering, or the desire that liking can bring. I like it, but I don't have it, and I want it. Therefore, I've got to go through all of this shenanigans, all of this karma machine stuff, feeling bad in order to get what I want to feel good. We need to change that feeling of I like it into I like it right now. Into I like it right now really big time. Wow, this is really good stuff. I really like it. I'm very satisfied with the way things are. I like it, I like it, I like it, I like it. So then when we see something on the outside and we can say, I like that too, but I don't want it. It's good, I like it, she's pretty, but I do not need to marry her makeup kit. So this is the way that we begin to see things, and that is through satisfaction, through the eye of satisfaction, getting yourself into a state of satisfaction and then be on guard to maintain that state of satisfaction, to keep unwholesome thoughts out and to entertain only wholesome thoughts, thoughts about the here now. A student asked me this question yesterday, and so I'm going to have to add something here too. Thoughts of metta are good, valuable, wholesome thoughts. But those kind of thoughts are only best done when you're in a state of satisfaction. If you yourself are in a state of dissatisfaction, then saying, may all beings be satisfied, what does that do? But if you are in a state of satisfaction, then wishing well and others to have that satisfaction, that has some value. So practicing metta while you're in that state of satisfaction has great value, and it keeps you in this present moment. You want people to be happy right now. And then when you get off the cushion, you can take that satisfaction and joy and actually help other people to be satisfied and happy right now. You can smile at them. You can tell them jokes. You can tell them Dhamma. There's all kinds of things that you can do to spread joy and actually practice metta. And so you might as well practice it while you're in that good state in anapanasati. But just telling students, oh, you have to say, may all beings be happy 100 million times in the next hour, that's not going to make anybody happy. Not you, and not all of those people that you're telling that they've got to be happy. And you better be happy or I'm going to get really pissed off, you know. So that's why we would say that even metta can be incorporated into correct practice. Mm-hmm. So that's about the end of it. We've done it by the numbers. We've done step 9, step 10. In fact, we did a little bit of step 13 along the way, especially when we have now wholesome thoughts rather than unwholesome thoughts. We're actually dealing with 13 through 16. 16, by the way, is the word relinquishment, which means to let it go, to throw things out, to be finished with them. That you're satisfied without that stuff. All right. So in that regard, we're already practicing step 13 through 16, anicca, fading away, cessation, relinquishment, all of those things are practiced there, but we practice them also within the sense of the Four Noble Truths, keeping track of, am I satisfied? Is this Third Noble Truth stuff? Is this a little nibbana even? Allow yourself to have little nibbanas. Oh, this feels so good. In that regard, we're also practicing step 1 of anapanasati with the breathing, to always make sure that we're taking deep, wholesome, healthy breath, because the reptilian brain will go back to shallow breathing just to save energy. Your job is to actually take the effort to start breathing deeply. the kind of way that a champion would right after he wins a race. Now that's a long breath. Okay, that's the way to look at it. Start breathing like a champion. Start breathing like a champion, start feeling like a champion, start having thoughts like a champion, and you become a champion. Become a Buddha, a lion. So, this is just another introduction. What do you think? You got any questions?
Yeah, it's like there's a lot of stuff, but it's also integrated. So yeah.
Yes, it all fits together.
Yeah, I feel like I've been dealing with anxiety completely incorrectly, like not dealing with it directly at all. So I gotta start looking at that now directly. Also, what I was wondering is that it feels like that I'm doing a lot, that I can gladden the mind, I can bring myself out of the hindrances. Um, but it feels like it still feels like the self is like doing all this. So
That's
how?
okay. That's not so much of a problem now.
Okay.
Okay. Because there is an agent in there. But that agent that is watching and now managing this stuff that's happening is just part of the process. It's not you. But it is very easy to get the concept that that's me. And if it is you, then you'll find some way to suffer over it. But if you're enjoying it, then there's no self there. There's no self there when you're really, really enjoying it. The lion is not selfish. That champion is not selfish because he wants everyone to feel like a champion. So yes, there is that agent, but the reality is that it is only an agent. It's not the owner. Like for instance, in an insurance policy, often there are agents. There is the insured and the insurer, and then there is the agent. The agent set it up. The agent did all the work. The agent's the one that put it together. But he is not the owner of that insurance policy.
So it's just another process, basically.
Exactly. It's part of the process. So you go investigate that. You find that out for yourself. You start looking at how the mind is working.
Mm-hmm.
We'll talk about Paticca Samuppada in detail and how it actually goes through it. Today, I'm just giving you the framework or the reference of how the Eightfold Noble Path, the Four Noble Truths, the practice of Anapanasati, and the teaching of Paticca Samuppada, and the five aggregates, and the four foundations of mindfulness are all just one thing. And is under the rubric of what to do and how to do it. And that brings the individual who's practicing correctly to the benefits of that practice right here and right now, not next month or next year. There will be peak moments, but all of them are going to start to be high now. No more with using your meditation to crawl around in your own muck. All right. Any more questions?
No, that's it.
Excellent. All right. Well, we'll see you next time.
All right. Yeah. I saw it.
Enjoy your practice.
Yes.
Practice with full enjoyment.
I will. See you.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.